Hello, so today patch 14.3 came out for TFT set 14, and today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some comps that can get you started, either if you're starting set 14 right now on the current patch, or if you've been playing for a while to keep up to date on some of the comps that I think are the best for climbing in ranked right now. So the way I usually do these is on patch release, I'll give you 3 non-reroll comps, so these are more level 8 oriented comps, and 3 reroll comps so that you can kind of get your feet wet a little bit, and hopefully have an easier time transitioning into the new patch. If you like my content, please make sure to like and subscribe. Sometimes we do a little bit more for fun content like tier list, but usually I'm doing guides on how to play different comps, how to play different aspects of the game or within different aspects of the game. So if you like that content, or if you've come here from watching a couple of my videos in the past, make sure to like and subscribe because it does help me out. We're working on our 10,000 sub goal, so that would be really massive if we can hit that before the end of set 14. So every little bit helps, and please try your best if you like my content to support me. So now we're going to get straight into it. So we're going to start with the 3 non-reroll comps. So these are more level 8 or fast 8 style comps. Something I always like to say, some of these comps are going to be really meta. Some of them are going to be ones that maybe everybody's playing because kind of like everybody kind of knows they're really strong. But in general, I'm just trying to give you advice of comps that I think are relatively easy to play in terms of like, you know, having a good game plan of being balanced of both strong, but not being so much as like a first or 8th where it's really risky to play. Either way, we're going to start. The comp right now that's kind of been like in the headlines, so to speak, that everybody kind of talks about is playing 7 Street Demon. So this was a comp that was kind of like a little bit awkward. Nobody really knew how it would work out, and it's kind of working out to be somewhat strong. I think it's a little bit overplayed right now. I think in the lobbies, at least today, there's always like 2 or 3 brand players. I don't think it's that strong. So be careful. Like, I wouldn't like 3 or 4 way contest this comp, but maybe that's just me. The idea is that you're basically just playing vertical Street Demon. Street Demon has built-in synergies of both strategist as well as techie, which actually works really nice because strategist works for your front line, which is the Nico and the Echo, and techie works for your back line, which is your primary carry, which is going to be Brand. Here I'm showing a little bit more of a capped board. A lot of times when you're playing 7 Street Demon, you usually will play with Ziggs and Kabuko. Now this board might be really reminiscent of some prior boards you might have played in the previous patch, which is like a techie strategist board or a strategist with some extra like sauce, like Cyberboss strategist. Because Brand got nerfed and Street Demon got buffed, it feels kind of like this board in particular is the way you want to go if you're playing Brand. And also because like it uses like the, you know, most of the AP comms use like the strategist core playing around Nico and Echo, it feels more like you're kind of like tunnel vision to play the 7 Street Demon variation, because the 7 Street Demon buffs that help the whole board out kind of feel the nicest to play around as like your core strategy. But basically, until you find Samira, you can play Jinx. If you're playing Brand, Brand has access to the backline, and he has a lot of AP from both Street Demon and his techie traits, so you really want to just like take that base AP and multiply it by some sort of factor. So typically the build that's going to be really nice is to go Shojin, just to help him to cast, then Jewel Gauntlet, right? You want to make his ult crit because you have a better chance of like sniping and killing a lot of the backline units. And then you want to use usually a Crit Glove item that can provide some damage at, which is Guard Breaker. So I talk about this item pairing a lot. It's just a really good item pairing. It's really efficient. It does a lot, especially if you have a lot of base stats. It's really good at multiplying those base stats in order to do a lot of damage. So this is something that will work out really well. It makes the Brand have a really high chance of critting, which has a really good chance of like deleting a lot of the backline units. In terms of your front line, you're usually going to be itemizing towards Nico. Sometimes if you high roll into a Kabuko, you can play around Kabuko, but usually that's something that you're playing a little bit later on in the game to kind of synergize with Ziggs. Ziggs works out really nicely because you're playing strategist. You can actually put the Brand items on the Ziggs if you hit Ziggs 2 before you hit Brand 2. Ziggs actually does do quite a bit of damage because you are still playing pretty deep into the strategist board when you're playing this. I would recommend if you are fully Ziggs committed, you might want to play deeper into strategist and just lose some of the Street Demons, but I think it's still really reliable. If you have like Brand 1 Ziggs 2, you can put the items on the Ziggs. It's a little bit awkward. I think the highest cap is obviously if you're playing 7 Street Demon to play the Brand 2, but I'm just trying to give you options because I know the line's going to be pretty contested. In terms of Ziggs items, the items that you put on Brand could also work on Ziggs. Usually you're trying to establish yourself at such a point where you're dual carrying at one point, so then Ziggs will usually hold on to your extra items, usually your utility items, if you can manage to make them. Something like a Morello works really well, and then you can interchange based on which one you hit as 2 stars, with Brand being the ideal holder at the end. What makes this board really nice as well is that you can play around Samira, and until you have Samira, you can actually play around Jinx to hold additional AD items. So if you have a Galaxy or an encounter where you're getting a lot of items, or if you have really varied items that, like, you know, maybe you're trying to play around Brand, you slammed like Shojin JG, and then you get dropped sword, you don't know what to do, you can actually build towards some AD items. So items like with the orange stat, attack damage, because you can item hold onto the Jinx until you hit the Samira, and that's actually your max cap, is this Samira 2 that can just kind of delete the backline units pretty easily. So that's like your extra items. You can build in a similar way with like a lot of crit, because you're going to have a lot of base stats from Street Demon, but you can also build like some more generic items as well, because they all kind of work out really nicely. I wouldn't really recommend playing deeper into Teki unless you have some sort of emblem. A Street Demon emblem opens up a lot of possibilities to even play more of the 5 costs as well, to cap your board a lot higher. With this board, you usually like to have a lot of frontline, so frontline units can help out a lot, which is why I showed Kabuko with the Ziggs. However, something to note is that you should try and be really flexible. You don't really need to tunnel vision on Ziggs, especially if you hit an early Samira. You can actually play some amp units to try and boost up the Samira a little bit. Something like an Annie or even a Yumi could work out really nicely as an efficient way to get some extra synergies to help out your Samira to do some more damage as a dual carry. In terms of tank items, here I'm just going to remove the Yumi, just keep the board simple. In terms of tank items, you just want as much Giga tank items as possible. Nico's going to have a lot of durability because of the strategist trait, so a lot of times you're just trying to build like some more into some of the base numbers. So like what I would recommend is just like, you know, your Giga items like D-Claw, Bramble Vest. I'm having trouble finding them, but once I do, I'll put them on there for all the screenshotters. Why do I always struggle with these ones? Oh, here we go. D-Claw, and then Bramble. I always get lost in thing. D-Claw, Bramble, and then even like a Warmogs can also be really efficient. I feel like Nico can tank forever if you give like some passive healing with something like Dragon's Claw or even a Redemption. And if you just give her a lot of armor and MR, she can actually tank pretty effectively for the whole board. You're also pretty flexible. You could drop down to 5 Street Demon, but I think the 7 Street Demon buff is really essential, and it just gives so much base stats to your entire board now that I would just always try and play towards 7 Street Demon with these type of lines. The second comp that I'm going to talk about here, this is one that has been very relevant in the previous patch, and that is Vex with Exotech. I know some people call it Vexotech. We can call it Vexotech, whatever. I don't really care about cute names. I just like to talk about the units themselves. So in terms of this line, usually you're just playing like Exotech, usually 5 Exotech. If you're playing it, a lot of times your exotech items matter a lot. You want to have at least one really good frontline item with these exotech items in order to put on the Sejuani. Now, this is a comp that is very dependent on tiers. I would say that you really want to have many tiers with this comp, just because Vex is usually a blue buff holder. Now, Vex does hit like units adjacent, so she hits like side to side a lot of the time. So a lot of times, with Vex, you'll put Vex towards the middle of your board. It is a little bit more risky. You could still put her in the corner if you're scared that she's going to get sniped or die really early, but usually you put her more towards the center just so she can get more of her ult like effect of hitting adjacent units. Blue buff is essential, and then what I would say is also essential is Gunblade. Vex has an ability where she converts basically like overhealing into additional true damage, so it's really potent to give her some sort of AP healing item, which is Hextech Gunblade, because it works with her kit really well and it just allows her to do significantly more damage. The same thing applies to like augments that give built-in Omnivam. Those augments are usually generally good because they can just help your board live a little bit longer as a combat, but stuff like Sated Spellweaver, for example, those are insanely strong on Vex, so you should always be aware of that. When you're playing with these boards as well, you could also play a little bit deeper into Executioner. You don't have to play 5 Exotech, but usually 5 Exotech is just a cheap way of getting a lot of HP on your front line. Now, the reason I say you need a lot of tiers is because not only do you need to make a blue buff, which is going to be hard to do if you don't know the way items work in TFT, is when you get a certain component, you're less likely to see the same component as a repeat component. So without having carousel priority, sometimes it can be really hard to make these like double component items, something like a blue buff. In addition, one of the best items on Sejuani is Protector's Vow. It just allows her to cast very efficiently, and the Sejuani cast, which is a giant, like, almost board-wide stun, is a massive swing in a lot of fights that can actually help you cap extremely high, as well as give your board a lot of time to do that extra damage and stall out for the Vex to, like, you know, chew through everybody. So if you just count it up, we need like 3 tiers to play this comp at a very efficient or effective level. So it's a little bit awkward to play. Make sure you play it from having tiers as your opener. If you don't have that many tiers, you might have to play something else. Like Shojan Vex is pretty bad, and without some sort of mana item on the Sejuani, you might also run into some situations of problems. Other than that, generic tank items can also work here. Last item on Vex, a lot of times people just put Guard Breaker, just efficient use of components, and just works out well with her kit, just like round out that crit chance. She already crits because of Executioner, but it can help out quite a bit. In terms of exotech items, I don't know how good the blue cyber coil is. It just got recently buffed, so I think it's a lot better now. But basically, I think still the repulsor lantern is one of the better items on Sejuani, but I could be wrong. But basically, any of the tank items, so purple, green, or blue, you want to see. In terms of items for what's his name? For Varus, a lot of times you can play towards Varus as a secondary carry. Even a Varus 2 will do a lot of damage, but especially if you can just like manage to pull a Varus 3 out of your bum, then he'll do great wonders in order to stabilize this board pretty efficiently. Varus, a lot of the times, Hyper Fangs is one of the best items because of how much base stats it gives. It actually works really well, especially with its kit of storing the energy in order to make Varus do a lot of damage. Hollow Bow recently got changed a little bit, but it's still pretty good on Varus. So you can also play Hollow Bow Varus if you so choose that one. But usually Hyper Fangs is the one you see, and you're like, yes, this is great for me. In terms of your max cap, you can drop some of the exotechs, like I said. Something like a Renekton 2-star is going to be better than a Jax late game, so obviously you can drop some of these extra units, play some deeper Divinicorp units like Renekton, or you can play some other Giga units. Like Urgot, I think, got a little bit of a buff, and now he's really strong and really efficient at just being like a really good unit to play on your board. So your max cap, you can always drop out of 5 exotech if your exotech item is not being used very efficiently. Like if it's not something that's really good on Sejuani, or if it's not something that's really good on Varus, you can drop and then cap your board around the 5 cost really efficiently. Now this is a board that used to be really strong. It's still really strong. I think Vex got a little bit of a buff. They said, I think I heard whispers that it was going to be reverted. I don't actually know. I wasn't keeping up with the patch notes in particular of if they like patched or changed anything today, but on their website it says that Vex still is buffed as of recent. So I think this comp is still extremely strong, and you should just be aware of it. If you have a lot of tiers, this is a good opportunity or a good option to play. The last comp that I'm going to put here, I think it's working out really well. A lot of times this comp, it's the Marksman Vanguard comp. So just to speak about it a little bit, I think Marksman Vanguard has like these waves of being popular and then being really unpopular. I think that it's a very easy comp to play. It's not a very high cap comp in a lot of situations. There are other variations that are higher cap, but those other variations that are high cap, so for example, playing deeper into like a Xayah board, or playing deeper into like Golden Ox and playing like the full Golden Ox Tempo board. Yes, those are boards that are going to have a higher win percentage, but I think that the 4 Marksman Vanguard is very efficient and easy to play. A lot of times you can still cap pretty high with it, and it's more reliable. Like your lows aren't as bad as the lows on the other situations. But basically with this board, you're taking advantage of 4 Marksman just giving you a lot of base AD and then using that very effectively in your board. The 4 Vanguard frontline is very strong. Even though Jarvan got nerfed, it's mostly on his healing, so he's actually still pretty good in the front line. And you get the free Anima squad in, which makes this Leona actually extremely tanky. So a lot of times what you're trying to go for is Leona 2, Aphelios 2, Xayah 2, so it is a little bit expensive playing around multiple 4 costs, but that's kind of how a lot of the 4 cost comps are right now. The good part is it's stable. It's pretty stable without a 5 cost, which is why it's a very bread and butter simple comp, and then you can cap out really high around like an Aurora later. In terms of items on the units, because you have so much base AD, a lot of times Aphelios you just want to auto attack, so double Guinsoo is pretty good, and then the last item you can go for a damage item, but a lot of times people prefer to have Gunblade just because it helps stall out the board a little bit more and ramp up the Guinsoos a little bit higher. But I would recommend at least 1 Guinsoo, at least 1 bow item, and then the last item could be Gunblade or a damage item. If you have like an IE or a Deathblade or a Runance or something like that, I think it's still okay. It's just not like giga broken, or it's not like, you know, as per the guide that I saw on online or on YouTube or whatever, but it's still good. Like, trust me, it'll be okay. If you look at the average placement on a lot of these things, it's not that bad without Gunblade. That is to say that I'll just put it here for the people that are screenshotting. And then after Xayah, a lot of times you could put utility items. Xayah, you just want her to like shoot a bunch of damage out. You just want her to like burst down. So because she's getting a lot of base stats from Marksman, Aphelios is like kind of your ramping up like win condition, and then Xayah is like your burst damage. So it's actually works really well as a backline. You want one unit to kind of like burst and try and kill units really fast, and then you have your win condition that if the fight lasts a certain amount of time, Aphelios will clean up because they'll just be attacking so fast. So Xayah, you build her towards burst. You could build her with a bunch of damage amp. Especially if there's like rerollers in your lobby. Giant Slayer can chew through. A lot of boards have a lot of HP. Think like even Street Demons that just give a bunch of HP. So Giant Slayer, you can get a lot of damage amp, get a lot of crit chance, pair it with another crit glove item, and bang, you have a unit that's gonna have a huge amount of AD from Marksman, a huge amount of crit chance from IE and have alt crit, and then a huge amount of damage amp to multiply that into the maximum amount of damage possible. Leona does have a little bit of an ability where she does like a little bit of a stun. I usually like to just have like, you know, if I have extra tier items, which usually you're not using in the backline for this comp that much anymore, you can put a Protector's Vow on Leona, and it's pretty efficient. It just helps her to get that cast off, which can sway the fight a little bit. This comp also caps really high if you have either a Marksman or a Vanguard emblem, because then on level 9, you can basically just play like an extra unit and just get like the Giga synergies. Garen also works really well in this comp because he can inherit Vanguard and become a really strong frontline, and then also spread around some of the other traits like the damage amp of Golden Ox or the damage amp of Anima Squad in order to like efficiently make your board extremely tanky and extremely powerful. Additionally, other 5 costs work really well, like Aurora, that basically can synergize with the Dynamo, and then you can put your AP items on Aurora, and then she can just swap in or throw in an extra unit. But like I said, a lot of times you need some sort of augment that helps out your front line a little bit. This comp scales very well because it scales through both the Marksman as well as the ramping up of the Aphelios. Now, those were our 4 cost related comps. There are a lot of other ones which I'll talk about at the end of the video, kind of like an honorable mentions, but now we're going to start talking about some of the reroll comps that are pretty good this patch. So one of which is actually Twisted Fate. So Twisted Fate's been gaining a little bit of popularity as not only being a reliable reroll comp that you just roll on level 6, call it a day, get your top 4, it's actually getting a lot better. If you noticed, a lot more people are playing Twisted Fate rolling on level 7 odds actually. This comp can cap really high on level 7 because now people go for like Draven 3-star in addition to Twisted Fate 3-star, and you roll for Braum as a frontline, which is a little bit better and a little bit more like it has more chutzpah than rolling for Darius. So I would recommend this comp more as a roll on level 7 style comp, but you can still roll on level 6. You basically have to make that judgment call. If you feel like you won't be able to efficiently have enough gold to make it to 7 and roll on level 7, then you would want to roll on level 6 in order to guarantee that you have your Twisted Fate 3, and then you can grab your Darius 3 and play around that. Usually you play 5 Syndicate, but something that's really nice about this comp is that until you hit 5 Syndicate, you can actually play a Vanguard variation of this comp. So you can actually play like 4 Vanguard with 3 Syndicate, something that looks a little bit like this, or just find your favorite Vanguards and put them in. If you're playing around the Braum carry. And 4 Vanguard, as we talked about with the Marksman board, is actually very efficient and very powerful. So you actually have an option for your mid game until you hit your 5 Syndicate. Or if you have a Syndicate emblem, this is a really good way to cap out this board, which is why it's becoming a little bit more popular as not only just like I'll put the fries in the bag, give me my 10 LP and cash me out at a 4th type of comp, but also a comp that can actually have potential to cap a little bit higher. With this comp, usually when you're going for Braum 3, Twisted Fate 3, Darius 3, and you're playing a board that looks something like this once you make it to level 8. Twisted Fate, he scales off of AP. They did just nerf it, so it is a little bit worse for wear. But but I think currently in the landscape of the game, especially when it's a new patch, the consistency of playing a reroll like this means that, like, you know, you don't have to figure out all the stuff of the patch. It's still something that's going to work pretty efficiently. We might see it taper off a little bit, and the numbers and the general like placement of this comp might fall off a little bit later in the patch, just because like boards will be optimized and then the shortcomings of this comp as a reroll will become more apparent. But especially in these first couple days, this could be something you can gain a lot of consistency with. With Twisted Fate, you usually want to slam double Gwinsu on him because of his passive of stacking ability power with each attack. You want him to attack as much as possible. A lot of times double Gwinsu and a Gunblade works really well. He just ramps up his AP, starts hitting like nukes, and then once he starts doing all these nukes, he starts to heal really well, stalls out the front line, ramps up the Gwinsu, stalls out the front line, ramps up the Gwinsu, etc. And then you just win the comp, you just win the fight, right? It's just a comp like that. The only time that this really falls apart is if the opponents get to a point where they have enough burst damage to break through your front line before the Twisted Fate can ramp up efficiently, and that's usually like when it kind of tapers off in the late game. Darius 3 is a really good way to cap out this board. Darius, even though he's a rapid fire unit, you really don't want him to have like the Guinsoo style of build. A lot of times you're putting a Shojin on him, and then you're putting him with like giga crit items just to make him like absolute delete. Darius helps to stabilize this board quite a bit, which is why rolling on level 7 is a little bit more popular nowadays. Darius 3 on his own isn't that great. You still need the Twisted Fate, but it's similar to like the Marksman Xayah that I was explaining with the Felio Xayah. This Draven basically will shoot through the middle and hit like the opposite side of the board. So a lot of times if you position the Draven opposite to the enemy carry, he'll just throw his blades and snipe the enemy carries, which is why you want to have him as massive amounts of damage. Shojin helps him to cast a little bit more frequently, but basically 1 or 2 casts from Draven could snipe the enemy backline, or at least kill one of the main damage dealers of your enemy, which will then allow you to be much more stable and win out in the fight. So it's actually very good cheese, and it's actually very efficient, and the positioning of your Draven matters a lot. This in conjunction with MF also has an ability to snipe the backline. MF can also do really well and can hold the same items as the Draven, so you actually have a really good possibility there. In terms of your Syndicate bonuses, it's usually going to be on whichever 3-star frontline you have, as well as your Twisted Fate. Additionally, in terms of your Braum items, a lot of times just building towards as much tank items as possible. All the tank items are fine, typically speaking. He does have AP and HP scaling, so you could go for stuff like that. Something like a Crown Guard can work pretty efficiently on him as well. Let me just find Crown Guard. Bang. But like I said, we've already talked about this comp a lot. Same as usual, right? Same as usual. Just a little bit more nuance that people are starting to figure out to try and optimize it a little bit. Second comp, I was actually worried, or not worried, but I was actually like contemplating whether or not I showed this comp, because I'm not a big believer in it, but it is doing a lot better because of some passive like buffs to like different parts of the board. But this is Fiddlesticks Bruiser. So this is a comp that I think is very conditional. I know some people play it without the necessary conditions to like win out, but what I would recommend is you need one of 3 things. So I'm going to put an extra Fiddlesticks here, and these aren't going to be like the Fiddlesticks items, but these are going to be the conditions for this comp to be successful. However, I think as of right now, it is pretty good in the current meta. This comp used to suck into Zeri, but now it's like actually pretty okay into a lot of the other comps. Also, suck was a pun, in case people are paying attention to try and make it more entertaining. But basically, the 3 conditions that you want for Fiddlesticks are these. The first one is that if you have a Bruiser emblem. Bruiser emblem on Fiddlesticks just allows you to stabilize a lot earlier, and it allows you to cap a little bit higher. So Bruiser emblem is pretty good, but I would say that's the weakest of the options. But basically, it just allows you to hit 6 Bruiser a little bit more efficiently, and then you can play deeper into Boombot, and the Fiddlesticks just stays alive forever because he benefits from having a lot of HP. Now, the Fiddlesticks, excuse me, doesn't necessarily like scale well off of HP. Like, it doesn't have HP scaling, so the Bruiser emblem isn't super essential. It's more of like an efficient thing, and it keeps the Fiddlesticks alive very effectively, but it's not something that's necessary per se. What you really do want though is Ornn artifacts. So there's actually a couple that are really good: Sniper's Focus and Blightening Jewel. So if you hit either of these, it is a very good spot for Fiddlesticks, and this turns this comp from like a reroll going for a top 4 style of comp into a win out, I'm gonna go first kind of comp. Basically, Sniper's Focus just works really well with his kit. Fiddlesticks does this thing where he splits and he sucks multiple people and does like damage over time, like dot damage, repetitive. The Sniper's Focus basically makes that have a lot of damage amp, and then works really well at just like amplifying that and giving him larger range to basically kill and snipe a lot of the backline units. So Sniper's Focus is really strong. Blinding Jewel also is really strong. Basically, Blinding Jewel reduces magic resist and then gives you extra mana. It's really effective on units that do damage over time, like dot damage. Fiddlesticks works really well as doing dot damage, so he's one of the best holders of Blinding Jewel. So any of these 3 puts you in a spot to play Fiddlesticks. I think in terms of the rerolls, just because of some buffs, like Cho'Gath got some buffs, Kabuko now can work really well outside of Cyber Boss. There's a lot of like small changes that made this comp a little bit more relevant and more stable in terms of playing all of the units. Here I have Garen, that's more of like a max cap thing. Basically, if you're building your items, however, you're playing Giga Frontline units, so you want to have at least one redemption somewhere, ideally, just to like give passive healing to multiple units in your front line. Usually this comp works really well with different augments, stuff like Shop Glitch, for example. Also, there's augments like what's that other one called? Rigged Shop. I think it's called the one where it gives you options of 3-cost units when you do rolling in your shop. Basically, if you can play any augment that gives you a good spot for a 3-cost reroll, what you're trying to do is you're trying to go for Gragas 3, Mordekaiser 3, and Fiddlesticks 3. If you can hit all 3 of these, then you're probably playing for first. Whether or not you have the win condition augments, which are or win condition situations here, it can still work, I believe, without those win conditions. It's just like your road's gonna be a lot rockier. So I would personally only play it if I have one of these 3. And then the way that you would build the Fiddlesticks, if you can, a lot of the times, is you are going to go for double Archangels or 2 really strong AP items that can scale very efficiently. So Archangels works the best. You go double Archangels, and then whichever one of these conditions you have. You see what I mean? You either go double Archangel Snipers, double Archangels Blinding, or double Archangels Bruiser Emblem. That's typically your build. Double Archangel works really well. Your front line is this impenetrable wall that's going to take forever to kill, being 6 Bruiser. Cho'Gath scales really well into the fight with the Boombot trait. And then in order to cap your board, a lot of times you can just play extra Boombots. So in this case, for example, here I can just play extra Boombots, which are really efficient to play if you have, what's it called? If you have the Bruiser emblem, then you can play the Urgot for the execute. Basically, your front line's going to live forever. Fiddlesticks is going to proc Boombot really efficiently, so getting deeper into Boombot is actually really powerful. And then additionally, with the front line, your Archangels are going to scale to a point where the Fiddlesticks is just going to snipe and destroy everybody and just like suck off, and they're all just going to, you know, be dead. So this is a really good board. It has a really high cap, but I would suggest having one of these conditions in order to work with. Now, the last reroll comp that I want to talk about, I think rerolls are a little bit awkward right now because a lot of the major reroll lines had one part of their tools kind of nerfed in a way that feels a little bit weird to play around. That is not to say that any rerolls that you have been playing aren't that good, but I'm trying to give you guys some new options a little bit. But one option is just playing around Nefiri. So Nefiri has a lot of different options, but I think the max cap variation is this variation where you play around Amp. So Amp became very strong as of recent. Sorry, let me keep this in. Boom. So your board will look something like this a lot of the time. Basically what you're playing is 5 Amp, and you're going for Nefiri 3, and a lot of times you go for Nidalee 3 as well. Now, Nefiri reroll works really well with this Amp board if you can hit the max cap of this Amp. So it is very awkward. This obviously works like amazingly well if you have something like Worth the Wait Nefiri or something like that, or Caretaker's Ally Nefiri, something like that. But basically what you want is Nefiri to crit. You want her to have as much crit as possible because she has a lot of base stats, and her amp effect, she basically can delete units pretty efficiently. This is also a little bit of an Ornn artifact check, so I'm going to put it over here. There's actually a lot of Ornn artifacts that can work really well with this comp, both ones that allow you to do AP damage, but also ones, sorry, like backline for like these units, but also ones that work really well on Nefiri. The one that everybody kind of talks about really as being really efficient is Spectral Cutlass. Spectral Cutlass just allows the Nefiri to teleport to the backline, and Nefiri has like this really massive ult where she can just like one-shot people. Nefiri also has built-in Omnivamp, so you have some survivability there as well. So Spectral Cutlass with like an IE is just like giga broken. It's just really, really strong. And then your last item, usually you're taking either a damage item or in some cases, just to add some consistency, you can put a Hodge just to make sure that the Nefiri lives or heals up afterwards, or even a Bloodthirster can work out pretty efficiently. One thing to note is that you play around Exotech. I would not play this line unless you have one of the Nefiri items. The 2 Nefiri items that I'll put them all here, the conditions. This is my Nefiri of conditions, okay? Similar to like the Fiddlesticks. These are the items that you usually like to see. Pulse Stabilizer in the past, even in the previous patch, was considered to be really good. Also, Hyperfangs is really good on Nefiri as well, just giving base stats that you can multiply by a crit. If you have Pulse Stabilizer, you can go Pulse Stabilizer in place of the Infinity Edge. And then also, in terms of some of the other items, all the other crit and jump around items where the Nefiri can wrap the backline are pretty efficient. So even like a Prowler's Claw is pretty good as like another option as an Ornn artifact. But Pulse Stabilizer is insane. You get an execute, so like the Gigabyss, like the broken Nefiri, is like Pulse Stabilizer, Spectral Cutlass +1. This is like the Giga Broken one that can actually work really well. Now, this is a hard board to cap out with because obviously you need to hit the Samira for the 5 amp for this board to be really strong. And as you can see, we're playing like a 2-cost reroll, but everything else is like a high cost unit on the board. So it's a very high roll style comp where you kind of want to hit the Nefiri pretty early and pretty easily. So you have to have a good spot to play around it. A lower cap version of this comp, I understand that it is lower cap. Oh, sorry. Also, this is a version with exotech. If you don't have a good exotech item, you can also just play strat amp as your max cap. So that would just be with like Nico and Echo. Where's Echo? Echo, right? Like this would be like a max cap kind of board. This is a level 9 board, but this would be like your max cap Nefiri reroll, which is actually really strong. This is like a board where you can definitely get a first with. Another variation that works sometimes is to not play deep into amp right away, and you can actually play it with the nitro core, which works really well. A lot of times when you're playing this variation, you're usually playing it at a low cost reroll. So this is one that is pretty common. I think people have seen it before. And you go for Nefiri 3 and Jin 3 as well. So because you have these two variations, this is like your Giga high cap and this is your not so Giga high cap. If you high roll the Nefiris and you high roll your spot, you can definitely sell your units and convert it into this board. As you can see, it's pretty efficient of a conversion. Just take out the Jin, Sejuani, push levels, play strat amp, right? This is something that will cap your board a lot higher and you can play for a first pretty efficiently, and then you can work on your Annie items, your Samira items. Sometimes you can even roll for Yumi 3, but I wouldn't recommend wasting gold on that because I think it's better to try and hit the Samira and push levels in that way. But if you need to, or if you start out the game with Nitro, you can actually play Nitro with Nitro, Jin, Nefiri, and then you can dual carry between the Nitro, the Jin, Nefiri, and you can also roll for Shyvana 3. This is a lot lower of a cap board, but because you're playing some earlier cost units, or sorry, some low cost units earlier in the game, it opens up the potential for stuff like, what's it called? Investment strategy, things like no scout, no pivot, the scaling augments, things like, one cost, like all for one or whatnot, whatever they're called, right? Like all the ones that can scale you off playing low cost units or playing units early in your game and committing to a comp off your early game board. This can actually scale really efficiently. Your conditions are very similar. I wouldn't play this comp unless I have a good Nefiri item. I think Jin also can stabilize you pretty well, but unless I see one of these two items, I'm going to be pretty reluctant to play the comp, and I'm definitely not going to force it, so to speak. Now, in terms of like these rerolls, these are the ones that I think are a little bit better. The reason I put Nefiri over some of the other rerolls is that I think that there are multiple options to play it, and it does have a really, really high cap. So it is a little bit riskier of a reroll option, but you do have the more safe bread and butter version of it, which is this variation. Of course, you would need to start with Nitro if you want to commit to this variation. In terms of some other honorable mentions, so we're kind of done with like the whole guide. Those are my 3 rerolls and 3 non-rerolls, but I just want to say there are a lot of comps. The balance from the worst comps in the game to the best comps in the game, I think got a lot closer in the current patch, which is something that I'm really happy to see. I think they're doing a great job at slowly making the balancing a little bit better. Some things I do agree with, some things I don't agree with. Like I really don't like the way like this board kind of played out, like the brand Street Demon board, but that's like a personal preference thing. I would have preferred to keep like the techie option more of like the go-to board to play with brand. But either way, there are other versions of boards, right? You can also play amp outside of Nefiri. This is a very high cap board, but it is very hard to play because a lot of people are playing around Street Demon and amp. So you won't have a lot of stability unless you hit the Nico 2 because you won't have that much frontline. It's a very expensive board to play, but this is like your typical like strat amp board that people played before. And then you can cap around a Kabuko. You can also play Mordekaiser and Techie and drop some of the strategists. That's also another option. There's also variations of reroll with Street Demon. I think Street Demon right now is really overplayed. So a lot of the lines that branch out from Street Demon used to be very flexible and not a lot of people played it. So it gave you a lot of options to play around like the Street Demon core and just play like Fast 9, 5 cost and all sorts of other stuff. But now because a lot of people are playing this brand board, I'm sure you see it in your own lobbies, stuff like Rengar reroll and Jinx reroll might be really hard. But if you do have the opportunity to play it, you can play Rengar Jinx reroll with Street Demon. If you're playing a regular Street Demon board and you're stuck on level 8 or stuck on level 7, you can also just reroll Rengar and Jinx and try and itemize towards those units as well. There's other variations of other comps, right? Obviously, Golden Ox is really good in spots with Golden Ox. Anima Squad, I think, is a little bit better, and you can play around Anima Squad a little bit more efficiently. But there's also like some cap potential with exotech still. I know Zeri got gutted because Hollow Bow is no longer a thing, but Pulse Stabilizer with Zeri is, I think, still a pretty good option to play around. I think it's just really underplayed right now, maybe because everybody's fed up of Zeri, but I think it's something that could still work out pretty well. But these are just like honorable mentions. The ones I think are a little bit more consistent, if you had to pick like another AD line to play or another AP line to play, it would be the ones I already showed you. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was informative. Try not to be all doom and gloom. I know, like, I'm already getting like the sentiment of people getting really upset with like Street Demon Brand. I think it is a little bit overtuned, but I definitely think it's a little bit overplayed. There are many variations to many of the comps that are out there, and I think it's definitely a lot healthier right now than it was with the previous patch with Zeri. So hopefully try and have fun out there. Try and experiment a little bit as well. I tried to show you different variations and different tools to kind of get you going. There's lots of stuff that I still want to try. Like secretly, like, you know, like I really think Morgana reroll, if we're talking like off the record, like, you know, off the record, like don't do this, like do this at your own risk. But I really think like Morgana reroll with bruisers, like 6 bruiser Morgana 3 is really strong. I'm not sure how strong it is, but I'm trying to analyze it, so I didn't make the cut of this video. But there's stuff like that. There's actually a lot of like these hidden lines that I think people are trying out, and they're starting to look pretty good. So I'm pretty hopeful that there's going to be a lot of other comps. So make sure to stay tuned to this channel, because, you know, if they become popular, if they become a little bit more played, that it seems like they're actually good and not just like situationally good, I'll probably be making videos on them. But there's stuff like that, like you know, so have fun, try your best. If there's lines that you liked before, there's probably still okay now, like even like Slayers and stuff like that. But just, you know, enjoy. Happy climbing. Bye-bye.